he describes the fact that there's a special unit inside the Pentagon, a special bureaucracy, which is actively planning the bombing of Iran. And he talks about this with a greater degree of urgency. He also acknowledges, of course, as we all must, that he's been writing about that for months, because that is simply the reality of what Hersh's sources tell him. He's somebody who gets leaks out of the Pentagon, and then he conveys them to the public. So that's what this is. So the notion that the attack on Iran is in active preparation, I think, is the fundamental starting point. They also had then a debate between Henry Kissinger and Madeleine Albright, with Kissinger essentially leaning towards the hard line towards Iran, but of course careful not to commit himself to a total attack, since he's much too opportunistic. And Madeleine Albright viewing all this with alarm. Of course, she's a genocidalist of a different school, but she's the one who believed that the Iraqi sanctions were perfectly justified, killing 500,000 children, and she is responsible for the harvest of hate that is being reaped today. She sowed what is being reaped right now in Iraq. So that, of course, mirrors, in my analysis at least, the split between the Schultz extreme neocon fascist madman group, that would be Kissinger inclining in that direction, and Albright going with the Baker group of moderate imperialists. An important distinction, to be sure, that we have to bear in mind. But the fact is that the drumbeat of war continues in even more hysterical form this morning. Now, I want to commend to you the 9/11 Truth Squads. One of the people who was on television this morning was Duncan Hunter. He's a Republican presidential candidate. He is Mr. Cost Plus. His hands are dripping with Pentagon cash. This is somebody who probably makes Bill Cunningham look like a Franciscan choir boy. And the interesting thing with Duncan Hunter is he's here in Phoenix. Has anybody seen Duncan Hunter?
San Diego.
No, he's here today. He's here today.
Well, let's go see
him. He was interviewed with these characteristic mountains behind him. And there he was. We go to Duncan Hunter in our Phoenix studio. Now, he might, for all we know, he might be in this hotel. Now, if you see him, you've got to know what to do. Two people to ask the question. One person with the camera. Mr. Hunter, Congressman Hunter, you want to be president. What do you say about the warning by Zbigniew Brzezinski that a new terrorist act is being prepared as part of a plausible scenario, and that's going to be blamed on Iran? Will you denounce it? Will you pledge to investigate it? Will you speak out? Will you do something? Or is it just going to be more cost plus as we go along? Pentagon contracts, of course. Now, I want to tarry a little bit with Zbigniew Brzezinski, not because I like him, but because the Brzezinski warning, I think, ought to transform this whole debate, in the sense that we now have a very high-level government official who has indeed participated in these activities. Remember, the director of the National Security Council under President Carter, who by his own admission in the Nouvelle Observateur, says that he sent the US teams into Afghanistan that lured the Soviets to make their attack in Christmas 1979, and therefore started the Afghan war with several million dead, to be sure, and the collapse of the Soviet Union. And he boasts about this. He's also the author of the Grand Chessboard, Central Asia, the 5 key republics there, Eurasia, the Haushofer tradition of geopolitics, and all the rest of it. This individual now says, in testimony before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, a new terrorist action is being prepared, which is going to be blamed on Iran. Now, this gives us an insight into 9/11 retrospectively. And I'll try to mention this a couple of times. Secrets, in the intelligence world, secrets cannot be kept, especially over time. One interesting story, somebody we follow at the DC 9/11 Truth. People remember Ruth Payne, right? Ruth Payne, the sort of the lady who was sort of Oswald's controller or nursemaid or what have you, girlfriend. She has gone on to other things. And the fact that, they could have liquidated her, but they didn't. But the fact that you didn't see, what did Ruth Payne do later? And it turns out that she was acting as a CIA agent in Central America, as far as we can tell. And we have somebody in our DC group who observed Ruth Payne as a CIA provocateur of some kind, acting in Central America during the 1980s. So you can't hide those things. A couple of other examples. Robert Gates. Now, the Secretary of Defense of the United States is the founder of Al-Qaeda. I quote him in my book. He says, we considered creating a radical mujahideen organization for all those muj guys, and it was going to be the International Brigade or the Arab Legion, but then we decided not to do it. Let me hang out. Right? He thought about it, but he didn't do it. He was for it before he was against it. That's Robert Gates. And so on down the line. How about this one? Shifting the ground a little bit. People are concerned about the timeline on Cheney. I have to say, I'm less interested in the timeline on Cheney than something else. In other words, we're looking for the headquarters of 9/11. I'm always puzzled by Cheney in the sense that here is a man who's had 4 heart attacks and he's got 3 pacemakers, and it's clear that he cannot be given any overall responsibility of direction. To be sure, he has a role to play. And he's also got his napping wife, Lynn Cheney, an ideological monster in her own right, who is down there in the bunker in the White House, and she keeps turning off the interagency briefing and putting on CNN because she wants to hear CNN. So poor Cheney can hardly be the boss of this stuff. Now, where was the headquarters? I think private military firms are the places that have the resources and the deniability and the privacy to keep out unwanted bureaucrats. And let me carefully mention in this regard, Negroponte is out as the intelligence czar. And in we have a guy called McConnell, Admiral McConnell. And if my memory serves me, McConnell is somebody who worked for Booz Allen Hamilton for 10 years. Including, I guess, September 11th, 2001. So, unfortunately, McConnell has already been rubber stamped by the parliamentary cretins of the Democratic Party. But I would have asked him, Admiral McConnell, where were you on September 11th, 2001? And what was Booz Allen Hamilton doing on September 11th, 2001? So we now have the overall intelligence czar is somebody who comes out of the Booz Allen Hamilton stable. Let's see if I can cover a couple more points. In terms of developments in the past 12 months or so, I would point you to the Moussaoui trial. The Moussaoui trial in Washington, D.C., right? They sent him up the river now, and he's incarcerated in durance vile. His lawyers argued, he repudiated his own lawyers, and they argued that he was a paranoid schizophrenic and that he was delusional. And I think that's absolutely accurate. He was a psychotic patsy. And this is typical of the entire stratum of these individuals. A raving ideologue, but nevertheless a double agent, in the sense that Moussaoui was obviously responding to something from a case officer or a controller, telling him, do what we tell you, because he constantly sabotaged his own cause. We'll make sure that you don't get the death penalty, and ultimately we'll take care of you. And that's what Moussaoui said in court. Moussaoui said, Bush will get me out. I know Bush will get me out. But he'd been told. Renewed interest this year in Sergeant Ali Muhammad. Peter Lance has a book on Sergeant Ali Muhammad. Peter Lance thinks that Sergeant Ali Muhammad is the master spy of Al-Qaeda who penetrated the U.S. Well, my humble opinion, this turns reality on its head. He is not, Sergeant Ali Muhammad is not penetrating the U.S. on account of Al-Qaeda. Sergeant Ali Muhammad is a U.S. functionary of a certain type who is sent to operate among Al-Qaeda. In other words, he is a tentacle of this invisible government. Sergeant Ali Muhammad is a part of the U.S. strategic arsenal in the same way that an F-14 or an aircraft carrier or an ICBM is part of the strategic arsenal. And therefore, I think Peter Lance has got it all wrong on this. Other timelines. Last September at Vanity Fair, or August, I guess it was, we had these interesting Leeds tapes with all of this back and forth. Is this a drill? I've never seen so much real-world stuff going on in a drill. But what do you say we call the drill off? An example of grim humor in the middle of all this. I think the important thing, I know David Ray Griffin thinks that the most important thing about this is that the timeline is wrong. Again, I'm much less interested in the timeline than what they actually say. And what you see is that there are a series of drills going on in the background, and most of the people you hear are little people who are not part of the coup. They're not winning, but some of them are. So some of them say to each other, what's going on? The hijacking was not supposed to be for another hour. It's all in there, Vanity Fair. You can even hear it. And it seems to me that this sheds light on the confusion to some extent, but also the difference between those in the state apparatus that are part of it and those who are not. In other words, the putschists and the rest. And some of them are. Now, Colonel Marr, I think his name is. His name is obviously an omen. He tends to ruin what he touches. Colonel Marr says, they asked Colonel Marr, why didn't you launch your fighters and put them over Washington, D.C. or someplace like that? You know, if you were an honest military officer, you'd have one thing in mind, strategic decapitation. That means the Pentagon, the White House, and all those buildings in Washington, D.C. So if you had one fighter plane, you'd put it over Washington, D.C. and try to defend that. And they don't do that. And they asked Marr, why didn't you launch your fighter planes? He said, I couldn't do that. They might have all run out of gas at the same time. Therefore, Colonel Marr is very much in the odor of putschism, may I say. And I would investigate that. One or two last ones. Able danger. How about able danger? I'm still hoping that people understand that able danger were terrorist controllers. Able danger were the case officers. You have this big special forces drill every year, able warrior. That's the defense, anti-terrorism. If you're going to have a defensive drill, you've got to have an attacking force in the drill. Able danger. A collection of patsies, double agents, and what have you. People like Atta, Hani Hanjour, Jara, Shigi, the rest of them, who think, to the extent that they're there at all, which I don't know, but to the extent you hear the voice of Atta making these crazy speeches from the plane, very likely, in my view, that he thinks he's part of the drill. He thinks he's going to be earning his federal funding that day, and then he's going to go home to his Miami Vice bordello where he operates in the evening. It's very interesting that we've had the whole able danger business has been crushed. That Senator Rutherford presided over the issuance of a report saying, we looked into able danger, there was nothing to it. Wrong. And another thing, of course, is Representative Weldon, this strange loose cannon, the congressman from Pennsylvania, who called attention to these things, was systematically destroyed by the FBI before his attempted re-election. And of course, people hate Weldon because he's a reactionary Republican and all that, and I understand that. But there's something more. There's the fact that he brought this up. He brought up a very sensitive matter by bringing out Schaffer and bringing out Philpott and these people and talking about able danger. He focused on this. And I would urge our movement, focus on able danger. Those guys are the terrorist controllers and case officers. They're not good people trying to track Atta. They're people who keep track of Atta because he works for them. And of course, Atta is a bit of a rogue. Finally, just maybe one last thing. In terms of the overall analysis, if we look at the great Europeans, Thierry Meyssan of France, Maurizio Blondet of Italy, they are people who within a couple of weeks of these events say the word coup d'etat. It's obviously a war provocation. It obviously involves the attempt to unleash the clash of civilizations. But above all, it's a coup. And it's a coup of a special type. It's not a coup that says we're going to take out little Bush and get rid of him, although that is perfectly possible. That was a built-in option, and you can even see little hints and gestures and feints, if you will, in that direction. But it's primarily to take an entire political system with political parties, media, government, bureaucracies, contractors, Congress, tens of millions of people, this whole mass of interest, and push them into a direction that they would not otherwise take. In other words, to overcome the tremendous inertia of this and get it going in the direction of the war of civilizations desired by the neocons and by the financiers behind them, London and Wall Street. So the European view was always, at the best level, coup d'etat from the very beginning. And I think the important thing for us is proceed from a political judgment. And the political judgment is not evidentiary. In other words, the political judgment is not and probably cannot be courtroom style, especially an American courtroom ruled by Anglo-Saxon empiricism as the measure of what's a fact and what's not a fact. There are political facts that somehow go beyond this. They cannot be made agreeable to the world of Locke and Hume and such people. But they're rather overall judgments. And I think in that case, we can also learn, because our job today, in conclusion now finally, is to say, we're also trying to move the zeitgeist. We're also trying to take this massive political development and move it in a different direction. We want to bring it back from the brink of World War III and the general Middle East war. And again, the way that I see that we can actually do that in the next month or two, let us say, given what Seymour Hersh is telling us, is let's try the 9/11 truth squads. Let us attempt to do that. If you see Duncan Hunter, don't let him get away without some embarrassing questions. And I've heard that there's a reactionary senator from this state who's running for office. Sure. Am I right? Somebody who's a little, he doesn't have, he probably has a screw loose or something like that. He gets rage fits, if you needle him a little bit, he starts to lose it. Arianna Huffington was shocked when Senator McCain went ballistic at the Davos conference up there in the mountains of Switzerland. So if Arianna Huffington can make him go ballistic, we ought to be able to make him chew the carpet in classic Hitlerian fashion. Come on, there's a reactionary congressman around here called Shadegg, who wrote that letter. Shadegg wrote the letter saying, hey guys, hey House Republicans, forget Iraq, forget that stuff. Talk the global war on terror, Bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, boogie, boogie, boogie. And scare everybody. Because it's ultimately, it's absurd. And I agree with the questions on humor. The only way to treat this stuff is ridicule. What is this, an old wives' tale? Is this, the legends on the prairie of, Bin Laden? Bin Laden has, he's this evil demiurge who comes out whenever you need him. When you don't need him, he's not there, but then when you need a statement, he emerges. And then Zawahiri, the other, evil genius, like the sort of secondary Satan, all the rest of this. It only deserves ridicule. It's an absolute lunatic, fantastic nightmare vision that has got to be ridiculed and taken down. So, thank you again. But remember, the 9/11 truth squads are the ticket for the next couple of months, in addition to other meritorious initiatives.
Yeah, I'm not one of the authors yet. After I write my calligraph book, maybe. I think Webster's watch stopped. He took 18 minutes instead of 10, but that's fine. It was very good. We're going to have Q&A for this panel, but first we want to, not yet. First, we have a few announcements from our sponsors. Anyway, and then we're going to give you guys 15 minutes of Q&A, all right? But right now we're into lunchtime, so, you got to make a choice, lunch or Q&A. Anyway, so. Okay, well, hold on. A few messages from our sponsors. I want all of you to go and make our vendors feel wanted out there. And also we have this. Okay, we've got legal actions one with Phil Berg. And this time we're going to try to get down to a couple of strategies. So you might want to participate in that. All right. Okay. Transportation. Any of you needing transportation? If you are staying here at the hotel and you need transportation to the airport later today or tomorrow morning, you need to sign up on the sign-up sheet out here. We need to know how many of you need that. If you don't sign up, guess what? You don't get to go for free. All right. It says here, there will be a $15 charge if you are not a guest of the San Marcos Resort and you still want to. Next.
Hi, my name is Scott. I'm from just outside of Atlantic City, New Jersey. I know you just want questions, but I have a brief comment I believe would be germane.
30 seconds.
Okay, John McCain wrote the foreword to the Popular Mechanics book debunking the 9/11 myths. So when the truth squads go out, that is an angle that specifically can be used against John McCain. My question is, I've been writing letters to journalists and to stations, Maureen Dowd specifically, some other people.
Who's your question for, first of all?
Just in general. I guess Jim Mark, or just in general. I'd like to know, would it be more effective to contact editors and producers, or do you believe it would be more effective to contact writers and on-air personalities?
By the way, where are you from?
I'm from just outside Atlantic City, Egg Harbor City.
And your name? Scott.
Actually, I think it'd be probably more effective to contact sponsors and just tell them, I'm not going to buy your stuff as long as you keep supporting the blockage of news over the mass media. But to be more specific, yes, go to the editors. There are plenty of writers, reporters, low-level journalists out there who are young, smart, aggressive. They're not stupid, and they know these things. They are capped by administrators who either are told specifically don't go there or just know intuitively not to go there.
Very good. Anybody else want to comment on it?
I think this, in terms of confronting McCain, this is absolutely the way to do it. He's contributed this odious preface to the popular mechanics screed in defense of the official version. So it means that he has invested something directly in 9/11, maybe not as much as Giuliani, but still a great deal. So for both Giuliani and McCain, 9/11 is the obvious leading edge, perhaps more than the other candidates. Now, all the others Cannon must be confronted on 9/11, but in the case of Giuliani and McCain, it's very, very obvious and connection, and it's all out there.
All right, next. We got any other name and where are you from?
Lance from Gilbert.
Gilbert, Arizona, I guess.
And I'd like to ask if any of the 9/11 troop squads are walking the halls of Congress looking for answers. And if we don't have any 9/11 troop squads walking the halls of Congress looking for answers, I would like to point out that Nancy and Rand gave Cindy an open mic to the Congress and to the entire world, and she could say what she wanted to say. So perhaps it's time for us to start walking the halls of Congress, knocking on doors, looking for answers, and going to the open mic and speaking to the entire world about the 9/11 cover-up and asking for the 9/11 perpetrators to be brought to justice.
Before I get a response to that, we have one of our local guys, Daryl, right here, one of our AV guys. He was just doing that in the halls of Congress just recently. Weren't you, Daryl? Yeah. Anyway, okay. Who else will take that? Yeah, Peter.
I do know that one or two people have approached Dennis Kucinich on this. He's also a presidential candidate. I think it would be wonderful if we could persuade him to make this an issue to campaign on, because we can point to the percentage of people who are out there who consider this a major concern. We have to get that message through to him, and it's I think you have to work on his staff first, but it's worth doing that.
Yes, Webster.
Well, certainly, this is very important. Kucinich, and of course the other candidate who's potentially sympathetic is former Senator Gravel of Alaska. And you can imagine the difference. If you're going to have a Democratic debate of all the candidates, from Hillary and Obama and Edwards on down, if you have one person raising 9/11, it's one thing. If you have two, it's a qualitative transformation. It's no longer an isolated voice, but it then becomes an accredited sociological mainstream phenomenon. And naturally, I share the urgency. We've obviously got to do more with the Congress. Now that when the weather gets better, it's snowing in Washington right now, but as soon as the spring comes, you can get yourself between the House office buildings and the House, because the Senate has this wonderful 3-station railway underground that they all ride. The House is harder because they only have one line. They don't have 3 lines, they have 1 line. And a lot of these characters come out of the Cannon and Longworth and Rayburn office buildings, and they walk across that street there. And if you get yourself there, you can buttonhole them. It's what you saw Michael Moore do. He asked these guys, why don't you have your children volunteer for Iraq? Right? That's exactly the place that we have to be as soon as the weather and the climate allows it. And I'm all for what you say. You're absolutely right. On the other side, Ron Paul. Don't forget the Republican side. We want to have voices there too, and that would be Ron Paul. However, don't simply focus all your emotional energy on Kucinich, Gravel, and Ron Paul, because what you've got to do is have a broad front, so that it's not that the pressure is being brought on these people, but that the pressure is being brought on the more establishment, what can we say, more odious candidates.
Also, Ron Biden of Oregon, good on 9/11.
All right, here's got another question. Right here. Right here first, then we'll get to you.
Hi.
Name and where
My
you
name
from?
is Wendy from Rochester, New York.
What was it again?
Wendy.
Wendy from Rochester. Oh, Wendy, yeah, I know.
I've got two questions. I've got two questions. I'll make them brief. One is for Mr. Tarpley. You alluded that there were attempts made on Bush's life, possibly on the morning of September 11th. Wondering whether you could elaborate on that. My second question is for Professor Barrett. As a university graduate student, I think a lot about how I can bring information to my professors. One of the movies I like to use is Press for Truth. I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit.
Well, very briefly, look at my book. It's a local newspaper. Bush spent the night of the 10th to the 11th in Longboat Key, Florida, in a posh resort, dining with his political cronies and his brother and so forth on the beach in a lap of luxury. But the next morning, a group of Middle Eastern types appeared and said they were a camera crew scheduled to interview Bush, and they wanted to come in. And the Secret Service found there was no such interview, but then sent them away. Very strange. And then there's speculation from Hopsiker and others that this might have been one of these exploding camera routines. That's pure speculation. But there's this, what looks like a half-hearted attempt to mimic, at least, some kind of a move against Bush, first thing in the morning, very early in the morning. And then, if you look at my book, there are these other reports of a carload of Middle Eastern men driving around in a van, yelling slogans against Bush. It's a very, very strange thing that looks like some kind of an intelligence agency demonstration or stunt to make a point. I don't think it's a serious assassination attempt, but it's something that mimics something of that order.
Like a show,
It's a reminder to Bush that he is expendable. Essentially, the message is, dear Bush, you are an expendable puppet. Make sure you follow orders today, and you will see another dawn.
Sorry, I think you might want to get in touch with the Project for a New American Citizen. You can Google them up. They're a new sort of student group or alliance of student groups out of Boston, and I think you can get students involved better with that group. Perhaps not putting 9/11 in the title will bring some people on board, even though that's at the very top of the agenda. So get some student activism going if you can. And as far as Press for Truth, that's not one that you're allowed to copy at cost with the 9/11 DVD project, but there are about 20 that are. With Press for Truth, however, you can hold a screening on campus and put out flyers in all the professors' mailboxes. You can also get Stephen Jones talk or other maybe improbable collapse and put those in the mailboxes of say, all the physics and engineering professors. And there are a whole lot of other things, but the main thing is to get something going on your campus through organizing.
But as a professor, there's no one movie that you would recommend as...
In the case of Italy, it's the same thing. Italy technically won World War I, but they said the victory had been mutilated and robbed by the Allies. They didn't get what they wanted. That's the beginning of D'Annunzio and Mussolini. So, I'm certainly aware of that. However, the greater danger is if this army is wiped out, then fascism domestically is almost guaranteed as a top-down phenomenon, in the sense that we now have the 150,000 GIs in Iraq. Their position is extraordinarily critical. If the attack on Iran occurs, there's every indication that all shipping in the Gulf, the Persian Gulf, the Straits of Hormuz, the Gulf of Oman, the Arabian Sea, will be thoroughly interdicted. No supplies, or at least nowhere near enough supplies, could ever get through. Oil will also not get out. Beyond that, now, they're well inland, landlocked 400 miles from Kuwait to Baghdad. It's a 400-mile supply line. 800 miles of roads have got to be defended against people like the Mahdi army today, and perhaps the Badr brigade and the Iranians tomorrow. There's every indication that this could turn into a Stalingrad-like situation. I showed a slide yesterday that attempts to compare Bush in Baghdad to Hitler before Stalingrad. And the parallels are absolutely uncanny in terms of becoming obsessed with the city, firing all your generals, using your secondary troops to defend your supply lines, refusing the recommendation to get out, and above all, retreating into a dream world, a world of fantasy and myth and intuition and the will to power and all this Nietzschean claptrap. So this is the mentality of Bush today. I think it's along these lines. So therefore, our task is to say, you want to support the troops, get them out. You leave them there, they're very much in danger of being, frankly, annihilated, at least annihilated as a fighting force. And that kind of a catastrophe would give Cheney, and in a certain sense you might say, this is what Cheney wants. He's happy to see the U.S. Army wiped out, because he'll say, well, we'll save all that money, right? It's the logic of Rumsfeld taken to the most extreme form. Say, we don't need those troops, we have H-bombs. What do we need for these tanks and so forth? We'll use H-bombs. Now, that's probably an exaggeration, but there's something like that going on. So the idea is they've got to get out, or they may be wiped out.
Peter says something to add to this.
In November, we saw the third practice session for mass arrests. It's Operation Falcon. 900 federal agencies and state agencies and local police forces, SWAT teams, simultaneously arrested 10,000 people in the eastern United States in 3 days. And made a little bit of coverage in the paper. This was the third time that this kind of mass arrest practice had occurred. We had every agency, IRS, FBI, Secret Service, Homeland Security, and in cooperation with local police departments, simultaneously arresting 10,000 people with federal warrants for felonies. Now, if somebody's got a federal warrant for felony, you know where they are, the local police, they go and arrest them. To practice doing this simultaneously, arresting 10,000 people in any 3-day period, is obviously a practice for any list of 10,000 people could be gone after. So this martial law posturing relative to the Halliburton detention centers and that is very much evident.
All right, that's it. I want to remind you that we're over a half an hour into the lunch break. We have something going on right here at 1:30. It's the 9/11 Unity panel. And also in the pavilion, we have the DVD project with Tom Tweedy. Also at 1:30, we have the film Zero, the premiere of the trailer of Zero.
Yeah, they want to announce this.
And also,
Zero is the Italian filmmakers.
Right,
they were there in Chicago. You might want to get a look.
And we also have in about 5 or 10 minutes from now, up in the Clark Gable room, we have a legal actions strategy workshop.
Also, for anybody who's interested, we are almost caught up on all the on-site DVD. If anybody wants Webster